Good morning, guys. Good morning, everybody, students, teachers, and anybody who is interested in literature. So, from what I've actually heard on edutainment for us, many people want to understand Tears of Joy, a book that is quite interesting, but with a lot of sad moments, right? So I already did something on that, and I've been sending people to check on it, but sometimes because of the interest of time, maybe people want it up there. So I'll be pulling it to schedule so that it can come on top of my YouTube channel. Meanwhile, let's talk about thematic concerns in Tears of Joy, guys. So if you have a question, you are free to raise it. And I also told you that if you need a guidebook that has analyzed all these books, including Tears of Joy, the Strange Happenings, Bridges Without Rivers, Becca's Misfortune, there is this other one on those, actually. I'll be listing them here so that anybody can refer. But there are so many books, about 7, grade 7 and 8. Of course, some people argue that they are not tasted, but when you look at CBE, it is focused towards enhancing literacy, the first focus, and creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, aspect of teamwork and all that. So you learn through what you read, you learn through the analysis of these books, and if teachers are not going to focus on the content of the book, it may be as well a real deal that is gone sour, you know. So let's try so much. Even if the books are not being tasted, you realize that a student who has gone through literature thinks differently from that who has not. So let's stay focused on this. I hope you're fine wherever you are. And this is Priska, a teacher of English and literature, but a lover of analysis of books. Even if they are French, as long as I understand the language, I'll deal with it. So let's start with the first theme, which is poor parenting. Poor parenting. So Madam Alice never helped the son outgrow the bad behavior. Actually, when you check on page 63 of this text, instead of her scolding or rather helping the child who urinates in the bed, she makes matters worse, you know. She keeps buying juice that is always in the fridge and allows the son to keep taking it even in the evening. All of us know that a child who urinates should not be allowed to take drinks beyond 4. However, Madam Alice, as a teacher, she does not apply this rule, you know. She lets the son drink a lot of juice and then just urinate in the bed. And what she can do is to laugh about it and say that one day we will have a swimming pool in your bed. Are you getting it? We will just get costumes and get under your bed. We will have saved money. What a statement from a teacher. That is page 63. So it forces this boy, Okoyo, to keep washing this bed, you know, and it's not a very good, you know, upbringing for a parent. The second illustration is that Madam Alice jokes about serious mistakes her son practices, including eating and leaving the food on the table, throwing around his books when he comes from school. You can actually check on page 63, you'll see the evidence. She also encouraged the son to take a lot of juice and commented that he should eat as much as his stomach can carry because the mother is alive and some people lack food because they don't have their parents. So this kind of behavior made the boy to be so stubborn and disturb Okoyo, the house worker. You know, you've heard already that this is a boy who urinates in the bed. And again, juice is not safe if you take too much. All of you know that, you know. especially for those people who have issues with, there is this kind of illness that strikes the throat part. Yeah, so check on page 64 for evidence. Okoyo had to wonder how Madam Alice expected the son to be responsible and survive on his own, because she was a teacher. Yeah? And she just encouraged the son to have a foul language, using foul language against the servant, and feel superior all the time. Have you seen these kids who are spoiled? They can talk to the servants the way they want. They can even, dirty the spaces or leave everything everywhere. And if they're asked by a servant, hey, the answer they will receive will take them to hell or heaven, I don't know. Check page 62 for that. When we look at page 64, we realize that Madam Alice could let the son to leave the mattress full of urine, so that Okoyo, the houseboy, could handle that. Can you imagine? If your son urinates, you are supposed to make that child know that they will have to take their, mattresses out. Because he was not that young. That boy was, a little bit of around 11 years. We also see that in the text, Madam Alice could hear the son speaking very rudely to the servant, and she could not do anything. She just ignored. The second thematic concern is good parenting. So, as far as we have bad parenting in this text, we have also good parenting. Hakina is the mother to Okoyo and Afandi. We realize that at 10 years, Hakina had actually taught the son, Okoyo, that in the absence of their father, they would talk proudly of him. Even though he was in a psychiatric hospital, they had not even interacted with him. She did not want them to blame the father and think that he was not actually somebody worth. So she could narrate to the children the best moments she had with the father. She would also explain what happened to the father, at what moment he lost his mind, and how he came to be stuck in the hospital, and how everything changed. She also, we see that by the time she dies, she's planning to take the daughter and the son to the hospital where the father is. And you can check that on page 4 up to 7. The second good parenting comes when we see Nafula. Though she's the only daughter of a doctor, and the mother is also a very high-profile person, she is very hardworking, friendly, and respectful, unlike the other son we've seen on the other side, She was also very generous, and she could appreciate the presence of the house worker or house helper, Afandi. So she treated her like a sister and even wished her well. She could even suggest to the mother that you can offer her some cause, you can offer her something better for her life. Evidence is found on page 71. We also see that Hakina teaches Afandi a lot of things, so that by the time she's dead, the daughter is reliable. She does a lot of things on her own. While Hakina dies and Afandi gets to the doctor's home, she also finds a lot of solace in Nafula, because, we established that they are working together, even in the kitchen and elsewhere. Later on, she is given education by the home. That is on page 11, you can see some evidence. Afandi and Okoyo had a very proper, good parenting. Their mother had taught them how to work hard and not to lazy around. And even when she died, they survived a bit. Though later on it became rough for them, but they survived. Can you imagine two kids who have lost their parents and they are able to pay some rent, work, sell some vegetables, only that economic times can be so hard sometimes to some people. The third thematic concern is betrayal, and I merge it with selfishness, even though you can discuss them separately. Madam Alice shows a high level of selfishness because she treats Okoyo like trash. She really hates Okoyo. She even refuses to pay him. Can you imagine? Someone working every day, waking so early, going to get water, cleaning everything, including urine that the son has poured in the mattress. He prepares food for them, and she did not pay him. Hard labor, you know. The second illustration is that Okoyo felt that their uncle was betraying them, you know. He was the only brother to their mother. But when, during the funeral, of course, he stood and testified that he would take care of the two kids. On burial, the kids continued staying in that home. Days later, the uncle comes and sends them away, tells them they should go to the family of their father. And he knows very well that when the father became insane, the father's family never cared about them. Page 36. The third illustration under betrayal and selfishness comes when we see that the same people who had grown up in Muse's house. Muse is the father to Afandi and Okoyo. When Muse was a teacher, a lot of people grew up in his house. And he even helped them to acquire a job. One of them at his school. But when he started the journey to his career, while staying in the house, he began to betray him, you know. Even though he had been treated as family, he's the one who began to, you know, create fuss about Mr. Muse. And even when he was recommended a head deputy by Mr. Muse, later on, he accuses Hakina, the wife, as having bewitched her husband, Mr. Muse. And you can check that on page 8. And even when the kids are struggling, we don't see this man anywhere in the text helping. Another illustration is that this man who had been hosted, do you know what he did? He asked Hakina to vacate the schoolhouse just as soon as Mr. Muse was sick, within a notice of 24 hours. People can be wicked, right? If you check on page 11, even though Muse had paid close to 1 million shillings for a piece of land, a big piece of land, the owner decides that because Mr. Muse has lost his mind and he's in hospital, he claims that he was never paid anything. And he does not refund it. He does not give the land to the family because he knows that the teacher cannot stand in the court of law and talk about the land. That is page 11. The fourth thematic concern comes under child labor and trafficking. Of course, you see in the entire book from page 2. Okoyo is hired by Madam Alice. Is it 2? Page 62, around there. Yeah. So Okoyo is hired by Madam Alice at the age of 14. 14. This is an underage. People under 14 are supposed to be in school, not working as houseboys. So Madam Alice pretends that he will take Okoyo to school, but when he comes to his home, he assigns him very heavy duties, and many of them. Then she does not pay this boy. Now, some of the tasks, as we look in the book, included fetching water, you know, preparing breakfast, getting the child ready for school, And all those were to be in line with the instructions Madam Alice gave. And remember, this is a teacher. What an irony. The second illustration of child labor and trafficking comes on page 95. We see that the Shujas, that group of street boys, or rather street children, complained that some of the members were taken by people who said they would work for the NGO only to be trafficked. So don't trust everybody. Some people will tell you they are taking you to a job only to traffic you to Gulf and you work as a slave without pay. That one is illustration on page 95. The third illustration is that we see Okoyo working in Madam Al's house, and he could collect stinking bed sheets, underwears, and dirty socks, that were on the trough. Then these dirty stuff were carried outside by him. He could finish laundry, refill storage tanks, and expose the wet mattress that the son to the teacher had left in the baking sun. So check that on page 64. The next thematic concern is law and justice. If you check on page 100, it is clearly shown that it was against law to hire an underage. Hence, when the officer in charge of children learned that this had been happening in Madam Al's home, what she did was to indicate that both the Madam and Okoyo were guilty of such an engagement. That is on page 100. Page 95 also shows us that the criminals who had almost taken girls for trafficking had been arrested. Yeah? And so girls became beneficiaries of free education after that. The next theme is fate and loss. Mse Pasiliano had been a good teacher, yet he ended up losing everything. Even normal communication abilities were lost. He could not communicate. Then he lost his memory. And later on, he had to run away from home. When he came back, he poured hot water on himself, and that led him to hospital. He was hospitalized, and they discovered that he had schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a condition that affects the mind. You cannot coordinate well, you cannot reason well. Sometimes you'll run away from home and all that. So his pay came first for 3 months. Of course, that is what happens with civil servants. Then half, and then it never came again. Because he had been hospitalized forever, he's not going to work. And he has been in hospital for 14 good years. You can check that on page 4 to 5. In the text, page 14, we see that the children feel Hakina, their mother, is working so hard to secure everything. She takes them to school and she wants them to go see their father because all this time they have grown up not seeing him. Unfortunately, how fate comes with cousins, aunts, and everything. She just collapses one evening, and when the children rush to take her to hospital, she dies. And the landlord can't help more than just having taken her to hospital. So her family is called, and they bury her. And now, the children have to become homeless because the family does not want them, neither the maternal or paternal family, and at the same time, the landlord cannot stand them. The relationship between a landlord and a tenant is just money, that rent. The seventh theme from this story is the theme of change appears when Peter, who took to hills after Okoyo shared the aspect of education now, comes to the social hall for the discussion on education. So Peter used to be in this, street children group. And he never wanted to see Okoyo when he heard Okoyo talking about education. But when he sees that Okoyo has been very close to the leaders, he now wants to hear about it. When you check the text on between page 5 to 6, Muse Pasiliano had been a very brilliant teacher, from the way we are told in the book. And if the community around the school had been taught by this teacher until he was promoted to the head teacher of the school, he helped the people so much. He even helped them financially, and he was so able to survive. He would rarely send children away for fee, even if they did not pay. That is on page 4. However, things change suddenly. He becomes unrecognizable. He can't speak. He cannot hear. He runs away from home. He screams. And later on, he pours hot water on himself and he's sent to hospital for 14 good years. That is a very bad change. Between page 5 and 6, of course, we saw that change later. On page 6, Afandi looks at the house that is now sparsely furnished, with few wooden stools around and a hard old coffee table, which has cracks in the middle, and remembers how they used to have a very good sofa set, dining set, and attractive decoration. Life changes, guys. The 8th theme is delinquency, truancy, and street families. The entire story of Tears of Joy is full of street children who take glue so that they can feel high, They had also picked some dangerous weapons such as knives, pieces of metals, stones, and catapults. That is on page 85. We also see that Okoyo meets several street kids, including female in Shuja's group, Wazito group, who are a bit violent, unwilling to cooperate, and ready to fight. There's a day Okoyo also meets Wazito groups, and they indicate that they protect someone for a fee. And they had carried weapons, they even wanted to attack him. We see the woman representative knows a lot about kids on the streets, but she's unable to know how to help them. They asked for tax and they harassed people. The street children were on the street because they were forced to, and they had learned that society was a place to survive, If you check on page 85, you'll see this evidence. We also see that Peter is a young boy who turns into a street boy and keeps running away, even when Okoyo goes by him. Okoyo and Afandi are forced to become street children after the mother dies, and they are sent away by the landlord from their house. So, it's only fortunate that they get a chance to pursue education. Okoyo also learns the judo tactics from the street children. That is Wazito group. We also see that the woman representative blames the society for causing street children because they don't want to take care of them and they throw orphans to the cold environments instead of embracing them in their homes. She finds it hard that they can be brought together until she uses Okoyo. The woman representative also says that as long as they are collected, they will attend free education and will be given a place to stay. You can check that on page 77. The interview between Okoyo and the woman representative shows clearly that the rise of children on the streets has forced them to sit in groups and do what they are doing, impose tax to people, and live that violent life. We also have the theme of good master-servant relationship, and we have the theme of poor master and servant relationship. Let's start with poor master-servant relationship, which we see in Madam Al's home. She calls Okoyo lazy, but we can see he's working so hard, but she keeps mocking him all the time. We also see that Alice is discouraged that Okoyo only belittles him. Not him, but her. That is page 58. We also see Madam Alice mocking Okoyo for carrying a very heavy load, that he should be here very fast. That is page 56. Though he's trying, at 14. Madam Alice tells Emily that Okoyo is a bad person. That is the daughter. That he has a strange disease that will infect them. And imagine he's cooking for them, washing their utensils, That's how ironical life can be. Madam Alice says that Okoyo has an excellent appetite. Excuse me. Madam Alice says that Okoyo has so much appetite, but he doesn't work hard. And she wishes that he should be also working just as much as he chooses. That his jaws are strong than his hands. And that his brains are also weak. Check that on 57. Even when Okoyo makes delicious food, she never wanted to appreciate. Can you imagine? She could eat very well, but she could not say it's good. She could keep complaining. And she made the son also do the same. That is on page 60. Good master-servant relationship comes when Afandi is hired by a good boss. A wife that is very friendly and says, "Call me sister." Can you imagine? Page 71. That boss always smiled at Afandi. Can you imagine? She even appreciated that Afandi was doing very well, cutting vegetables very well, onions. That is page 72. She even later reported that to the officers in charge of children that she had someone who was supposed to be in school and she was taking custody of her. She and her husband went a mile forth to enroll Afandi in school. That is Bima Junior and Senior School. After seeing that she had the potential to go to university, can you imagine? And indeed she goes to university. This made me want to cry. They as well signed papers to adopt these people, that's Okoyo and Afandi. That is page 105. And they allowed Okoyo to become part of their family. Theme number 11 is theme of poverty and desperation or despair. Madam Alice always talked about people who could not afford food. That means that we have poor people there. When Okoyo informs street boys about going to school, one of them says that street children do not have such. They don't belong to school. That is out of despair, hopelessness, right? That is page 88. The houses in Kilimo were very poorly built, including where Okoyo and Afandi had been living with their mother Hakina. Poor sanitation, overcrowded, stench. Check page 53 for evidence. Afandi and Okoyo were the face of poverty itself. When their mother died, their grandfather's house was quite old and it leaked inside. And they were sent away by their uncle then. That is page 35. If you check on page 42, you will see that Okoyo and Afandi aim to break the cycle of poverty, the harsh reality of homelessness. And that's why they really focus on education. Okoyo also felt like Lucas was telling him to go starve away because his parents could not afford what his parents could. Lucas, this boy that the child of Madam Alice. He felt he was telling him to take his poverty far from there. Check page 64. Actually, I felt like crying also at this point. The boy looked pathetic, dirty, with torn rags and small dirty plastic containers stuck on his nose. That is the boy described in the story on page 84. Peter says he is there pleasing his tapeworms. He doesn't even have food. That is page 81. If you check on page 79, Peter crunched on an orange that was rotten. Can you eat something rotten, especially fruit? No. The next theme is fear and suspicion. When Okoyo explains his mission to Peter, the boy suspects that he's not a good person and he runs away. Page 97. Okoyo stands nervously in front of Moka sub-county office, waiting to meet the government officer. But he's so afraid, he doesn't want to go in. Okoyo is really worried about the sister, who is a teenager, and they are going to meet these wild boys. You can check on page 51. Micah and members of their group suspect that Afandi and Okoyo are not telling the truth. And they even threaten them that if they are not telling them the truth, they'll know what they'll do to them. That is page 51. If you check on page 23, Okoyo could not stand still in hospital. He labored for breath when he actually saw the condition of the mother. That is a lot of fear, right? Orwako in the story seemed to treat Okoyo with some level of suspicion, That is page 19. Then most children also feared the landlord of Hakina. That is page 18. Page 101, we see that when every street child heard the government was looking for them, they had become more suspicious, and they would just avoid, even when they were brought food, until one time they were brought a packet of milk and bread, and they would disappear. They would just pick food and disappear. They didn't want to listen to them, especially after some girls were taken. Mike from Wazito says that he fears authority. Check that on page 97. Page 97 also shows us that the guards of Moka sub-county offices were looking at Okoyo suspiciously. Street children were suspicious of everyone. They suspect that Okoyo is snitching on them and has intention of revealing them to the officers. Afandi also feared that the street boys would mishandle her. Afandi had a lot of fear when she first arrived at the doctor's home. She did not know that they are good people. The 13th theme is the theme of exploitation. Of course, we've talked about hiring of young people. So Madam Alice, as a teacher, hires a 14-year-old boy, Okoyo, and threatens him not to reveal her or his real position, because if he's arrested, he will be charged in court and she will not be there. That is page 67. Okoyo would wake up at 6 o'clock, fetch water, prepare meals, prepare Madam's children before cleaning the house. He would do laundry, expose Lucas' mattress to the sun. He could carry a lot of heavy, load and scramble around and struggle. That is exploitation, right? We also see the theme of superstition and ignorance. On page 7, Muse became sick and people just thought that Hakina had bewitched him. But the reality from hospital is that he had schizophrenia, a disease that is known, that causes madness. Okoyo had heard talks about the father being bewitched also all over the place. That is page 7. The next theme, theme 15, is education. The theme of education is seen on page 65 when Okoyo wills to continue schooling at one time and quench the thirst of, learning. Page 74 shows us that Afandi learns that junk food and carbonated drinks cause cancer when they are talking with Nafula. Muse Pasiliano is indicated to have been a brilliant teacher who was later promoted to a head teacher and never sent away students from school even when they didn't pay, and he helped a lot of pupils in their learning. He rarely sent them away. That is page 4. When we go to page 93, Okoyo learned basics of karate and judo while in the street. That is learning, right? It's education. It's a form of education. One of the people Muse had helped had been recommended by the school to become the deputy. Imagine. Hakina took children to school and struggled to pay for their education. She even worked hard, doing laundry work, cutting the vegetables and selling in her stall, We can look at page 12 to 13 for that evidence. Madam Alice is a respected teacher, so that's education. Her children, Lucas and Emily, go to school. Afandi also learns that Nafula, teaches her that how to use different electronic devices in their houses for cooking and also for serving different tasks, as shown on page 71. Afandi is re-enrolled to school by her employer. Lucas too manages to go back to school through the woman rep, and he is confident to pursue education. The last theme, my people, it is determination, hope, and focus. Okoyo hopes that he will meet Lady Luck one day. That is page 3. Hope is a very good thing, even at the worst time. Having a purpose, Okoyo decides that he was going to get into trouble with Madame. That is page 89. Okoyo and Afandi hope that they will manage their mother's business and pay rent, and they really try, but it becomes difficult for them. That is page 40. We see page 18 that even though the landlord was tough, he took a breath and walked towards the house when their mother collapsed. Page 89, Okoyo had a purpose in life, and so, with the great determination, he went to work tirelessly day after day. Page 75, Okoyo hoped to go through school and make it in life. Page 14, Hakina had always had this hope of working hard and making life better for the children and even taking them to their father. Page 75, Okoyo watched news to stay informed about current affairs in the country and the world around him. Page 76 to 79 informs us that Okoyo followed the Youth Affairs in Development program, and being a fan of what he was watching, he became very attentive when he heard the women representative of Moka Sub-County talking about the challenges of street children and how they can be helped. And he therefore pursued the interest of making them stop the vices of harassing residents, imposing tax on some, and apportioning themselves to places. Even when street children resist Okoyo, Okoyo never gave up on them. He kept following them. Page 85. Page 14 shows us that Hakina informed the children that on the need that they should be working harder because they had a costly trip to see their father ahead of them. Page 70, the doctor's wife hoped Afandi would enjoy her stay in her home and call her a sister. He used free time to catch up with reading while thanking the mother for making him realize about education. That's Okoyo, page 65. Page 5, Hakina had always hoped that her husband would become better and come back to the family. And finally, page 65, he developed the secret wish to continue with schooling. So guys, that is the end. I hope I'll be attaching notes also because some people ask for that. Thank you so much. Keep watching Edutainment for us for more videos. Bye-bye for now. Make more requests. Thank you so much for your love. Continue subscribing to the channel and like my videos. Bye-bye.